the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge joining us in studio talking about all kinds of things. We've got multi-state settlements, legal action against e-cigarette companies, all of these things here, vaping, all the good stuff. So let's just get right into it here. You announced actually that the state would receive $2 million in a Johnson & Johnson settlement. Kind of what's going on with that? What are we talking about?
We were pleased to announce that settlement this past week with Johnson & Johnson. Essentially, this results from a lawsuit with 41 other states regarding a surgical piece that Johnson & Johnson had sold and advertised, and unfortunately women across America suffered because of it, and it wasn't what they said it was. And for all the moms, daughters, sisters out there who relied on Johnson & Johnson, this is letting them know that we heard them, that we're listening to them, and this will get that $1.8 million back to the state of Arkansas on behalf of those consumers.
Now, kind of a drop in the bucket, I would assume there with 1.8, but what is that money? Does it go towards anything specific, or is it just back in general funds?
It goes back to what's called the Consumer Protection and Enforcement Fund, so that way we can make sure other consumers are protected and, if possible, to make these folks whole. But essentially, anytime that we go after a company for deceptive trade practices, any funds received from that goes back to the state in our consumer protection account to ensure that we are able to take care of other folks and to educate them and to go after other bad actors. You know, we want to hold all companies accountable if they are misleading Arkansans. And in this case, Johnson & Johnson was misleading Arkansans and American women about the safety of the device that they were selling.
Another hot topic here that's been coming up lately is vaping, e-cigarettes, all those sorts of things. Obviously, the injuries related to that are kind of rising across the country. What are you guys doing to combat that here in Arkansas? Well,
vaping is a true epidemic, particularly among our young people, and too many teenagers think that they are simply vaping flavored water, when in fact they're vaping incredible amounts of nicotine in any one setting. And so we're seeing with doctors what they are talking about, what they are seeing with patients in terms of 15-year-olds having the lungs of 70-year-olds. A couple of weeks ago, I hosted a summit in partnership with Arkansas Children's and UAMS here in Little Rock, as well as in Bentonville in Northwest Arkansas, discussing primarily teenage vaping and the dangers of it, because these young people have no idea what they're putting into their lungs. Likewise, we have filed lawsuits against 3 online e-cigarette retailers who have been selling products, not only delivering tobacco into the state of Arkansas, which is illegal to deliver that, purchase it online, deliver it into the state of Arkansas, but primarily for their age verification process. Young people are able to get on, make purchases for e-cigarettes and vapes without proper verification on those websites.
And you guys are kind of going after some of these as well for some of their, I guess, their advertising practices.
That's right, under the same Deceptive Trade Practices Act, and how they're advertising, particularly again to young people, because so many of these e-cigarette makers, and we just saw this past week where Juul, who's the primary e-cigarette vaping product, it's the household name, if you will, it's the Coca-Cola, the Xerox. They have announced that they are not going to advertise and sell flavored e-cigarettes, and that's a great start in the right direction, because too many of these e-cigarettes are in cotton candy, birthday cake flavor. These are not in your traditional tobacco flavored, menthol flavored cigarettes like traditional tobacco is. And so they're geared toward young people and attracting young people to begin using it and to become addicted to nicotine. And we want this generation, Generation Z, to be nic-free.
And I guess, too, where do we sort of draw that line in terms of the advertising practices or just the scope of it? Because I would assume that 18, 19, 20-year-olds, which can purchase these things, kind of have a lot of those same tastes, same vibes as, even 16, 17-year-olds. So where do we kind of draw that line when it comes to this sort of thing?
Well, with regard to deceptive trade practices, we go after companies who are, just as the Act states, deceptively leading consumers to purchase something believing that it is safe when it is not, or that it has some sort of an outcome that it would not have. In this instance, with regard to vaping, the average age of someone beginning to vape or use e-cigarettes in Arkansas is 14. That's the average age. That means, Jay, that we've got your 30-year-olds combined with your 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. This is an epidemic across our schools. We've got to get more parents educated. We've got to get them educated so they will go through the backpacks, look and see if something looks like a vape or if it looks like a USB drive. Most kids aren't using a USB drive anymore, and so that's why we've got to get parents to wake up and to make sure their kids are not using these products, because it is extraordinarily dangerous and potentially deadly, as we have seen across the country.
And we've done plenty of stories here about school districts really trying to step things up, starting to really take some of those things back. The state also taking some of those products back as well as part of the drug take back.
We are, and so this Saturday, October 26th, there is a statewide drug take back, and you can find take back sites across the state if you go to artakeback.org. And this is for people who have perhaps medicines that they haven't used, as well as if they want to bring in a vape that they are not using or that they found their kid's backpack and they don't know what to do with it. Bring that in, let law enforcement take care of it. We still have a prescription drug epidemic in the state of Arkansas. I don't mean to be an alarmist by calling these things epidemics, but they are. We lose hundreds of lives every single year to prescription drug addiction, and we must make sure that we are cleaning out our own medicines and to get those into the hands of the authorities so that way they can dispose of them properly. Too many Arkansans simply flush them down the commode and taint our water system. Folks, don't do that. Make sure that you bring them to one of these take-back sites. They're also available year-round, but each spring and fall we do a statewide prescription drug take-back, and again, that's Saturday, October 26th. You can find a location at artakeback.org. Please empty out those medicine cabinets and save a life.
Absolutely, very important here. I do want to get your take on something fairly historic in the state. Last week, voting out Representative Mickey Gates after he pled no contest to not filing or paying state income taxes for several years. I mean, this is something that it's been over 100 years since the legislature has taken these types of actions. I guess what was sort of your response to all that?
Well, it's an unfortunate situation. Former Representative Gates should have resigned. However, he did not. Representative Gates was on the taxpayer payrolls and he was not paying his own taxes at that time. It was absolutely irresponsible, and while it was a difficult situation for our legislators, I believe that they in fact took the right measure by expelling him, removing him from the General Assembly.
Were you a little surprised at the margin of that vote? Because it was pretty clear cut, not necessarily drawing down party lines or anything like that, but 88 out of 100.
Well, I think that speaks volumes to the leadership that we have, and that we recognize whether you're Republican or Democrat, wrong is wrong. And in this instance, Mickey Gates was wrong not to file and properly pay his taxes, and he was wrong to put the legislature through that. Once he realized that it became apparent, charges were filed against him, and a no contest plea does not mean that someone is innocent. A no contest plea means that you are not contesting those criminal charges.
Right.
So if you were to say to the average Arkansan, if someone pleads no contest, is that it may not be a conviction of guilt. However, it says that I am not going to contest these criminal charges against me.
I know
that's what he pled to.
And I know that was a sticking point that Speaker Shepard kind of stuck to during all those proceedings here. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, thank you for coming in here. We could have show after show with you with all the things that are going on in your office.
Well, we love to do the fighting for Arkansans, and we appreciate you, Jay, for covering them. So.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you. Well, coming up after a quick break, members of the Libertarian Party announced he hopes to represent Arkansas in the Senate. We talk to Ricky Harrington Jr. when we come back about why he's running for Cotton seat. You're watching Capitol View Sunday morning.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back into Capitol View. A missionary from Pine Bluff announcing he's hoping to take Senator Tom Cotton's seat in Washington. Ricky Dale Harrington Jr. is challenging Senator Tom Cotton as a Libertarian. Democrat Josh Mahoney also running for the senator seat. He joins us now to share what he wants to address with the issues. Mr. Harrington, we appreciate you coming in here. Let's get into it here. Libertarian Party, not a lot of people may be familiar with the party. I guess how would you describe sort of that libertarian political point of view?
Well, in a nutshell, the Libertarian Party is for more freedom, less government involvement in people's personal lives. And the things that we can do in this country, essentially. We are for constitutional rights. I've heard one person say, less government, maximum freedom, in a nutshell.
There you go. That's the mantra right there. Let's get into some of the issues here. Act 164, wanted to touch on, just because your party kind of spearheading some of that with the ways to get on the ballot. I know Act 164 had to have a 3% ballot signature to actually get on the ballot. I guess what's the beef with having to gather the signatures and everything like that?
Okay, it started off with as Senate Bill 163, and I testified against that in the Arkansas House Government Agencies Committee.
Right.
And essentially is coming off the heels of the previous election whenever Mark West got 2.9% of the vote. And so they increased the threshold for us to be able to get on the ballot to 3% of the total electorate of the people that had voted in the previous election.
Right.
And it just seemed like it was an abuse of legislative power. And in the testimony that I gave, that's not something that people of America, especially our elected officials, should be doing. Using their office to insulate their own party's power. That's just wrong.
All right. Let's get into some of the issues here. I know you're real big on criminal justice reform. What are some of the things that you want to see? Because I know Arkansas has a very high rate of incarceration. What would you want to see changed, at least really initially?
Initially, I believe we should focus more on education and rehabilitation. The criminal justice, do we want to put more people in prison or do we want to eradicate crime?
Right.
In order to do that, we have to attack the type of behavior and mindset that produces criminality. And so it starts with the whole the school to prison pipeline that some prison reform groups call it.
Right.
And it's going to take a lot of different things, but mainly I would like to see just our justice system being more just. We just had a big case in Texas regarding Amber Geiger. She got 10 years for murdering Botham John, and there are people serving prison terms right now that never kill anyone that have 100 years in life sentences. That's not a just justice system.
Right. Healthcare, I know one of the big talkers here when it comes to this next election here. What do you guys, or what do you personally want to see done when it comes to healthcare?
I'd like to start off by kind of telling an anecdote about how my own experience. I've lived in a socialistic country, I've lived in a communistic country, and of course I'm an American, so we got the capitalism part taken care of. But we really need to take a look at the way health care is delivered in our country. I went to go visit my doctor around this time last year, and I had insurance, but there was some sort of snafu between the doctor's office and the insurance company. I was on the phone with the insurance company, and they said I had insurance, and I'm telling the insurance personnel there that I have insurance, and they're saying that we can't verify that you have insurance. And this was a simple visit just to get some maintenance medication. And so I go in there, I tell my doctor what I need. I need my medicines refilled, and I'm in there 5 minutes.
Right.
That cost me $200 just to get medicine refilled. We need to fix that, and we need to. And I don't think Medicare for all and a socialistic approach is what we need. We need to empower healthcare providers and patients with the ability to negotiate with one another and come up with a fair and equitable way for healthcare to be delivered.
Should be interesting. Quickly here, we're kind of bumping up on time here, but what about the political division in this country? Kind of what's your take on it? What do you want to see change?
We've been watching testimony after testimony in Washington regarding President Trump's dealing with Russia, thinking about former Director Comey. And I really lined up with him whenever he said that every American should be upset that after decades of fighting the Russians in the Cold War, they beat us at our own game. They beat us at our own game. That should make us deeply sad. Instead of digging our heels in and fighting amongst one another, we should come together and get to the bottom of what's really happening.
All right, well, Ricky Dale Harrington Jr. is going to hopefully be on the ballot at least as the Libertarian candidate. Boss, we appreciate you coming in here. Best of luck to you out there on the campaign trail. Senator Cotton's campaign announced he has set a record for raising funds in an Arkansas Senate race, raised over $1 million for re-election in the third quarter alone. Cotton has over $4 million in cash on hand. Well, when we come back, we take a look at your top political headlines. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
President Trump talked extensively about the situation in northern Syria during a campaign rally in Dallas. He acknowledged his approach to Turkey and the Kurds is, quote, unconventional, but the two sides needed to be allowed to fight a little. But the president now claims the two sides and his congressional critics are happy with the temporary ceasefire.
We change our approach to homeland security. As an example, in that example, nobody would have ever done that. You have to be a little bit different to do it that way. I took a lot of heat, even from some of our congressmen, even from some of our senators, but now they're all happy, and I'm happy with them. I'm happy with them.
He is happy. Now to that lit Democratic debate last week, the first with Senator Elizabeth Warren as the front runner, and the first since the launch of the impeachment investigation. The Democrats blasting President Trump's abrupt withdrawal of U.S. troops.
Soldiers in the field are reporting that for the first time they feel ashamed of what their country has done.
What Donald Trump has done because of that phone call with Erdogan is basically giving 10,000 ISIS fighters a get-out-of-jail-free card.
And Bernie Sanders making his return to the campaign trail for the first time since that heart attack and major surgery earlier this month. He's also rolling out a pair of prominent endorsements, including one from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the progressive and rising star in the Democratic Party, and one of the most influential voices on the left. He's expected to endorse Sanders during a rally this weekend. Republicans have maintained that pushing for impeachment will not help the Democrats, especially in swing House districts. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is circulating a memo that says, don't worry about that. House Republicans maintain that the president is not above reproach and think the process for the inquiry is what will hurt Democrats. Arkansas Representative Rick Crawford wants the process to be more open.
The reality is, if they felt like they had a case for impeachment, why are they doing this in secret? It's like they're deliberately denying the president due process. I believe the president is not above the law, but I also believe he's not below the law. And if you've got a case for impeachment, let's make that case. Put it on the floor, let's vote for it, and let us all have a voice in this process. But they've kind of sequestered this whole process downstairs in the basement, in the SCIF, the intelligence room, the Intelligence Committee room, and even denying members of Congress access to transcripts. And so there's no classified material, but the hearings and the depositions are being closed in executive session so they can control the narrative.
Lawmakers held a hearing on Wednesday on the quality of care, or lack of it, at VA hospitals and health centers in the U.S. Lawmakers grilled the Department of Veterans Affairs over what appears to be disastrous failures at a number of VA hospitals. Recent deaths at VA facilities in Georgia, Arkansas, and West Virginia have prompted criminal investigations, allegations of negligence, and even murder. The VA defended its medical care overall, but did admit there are some serious problems.
I am sorry for any pain that any veteran or their families have experienced as a result of our employees acting inappropriately.
But Congressman Mark Takano says, I'm sorry isn't nearly enough. Takano says the VA must be sure its physicians have the proper training to care for our heroes. Medical marijuana sales in Arkansas are fast approaching the 1-ton mark with a total value of nearly $14 million. The Department of Finance and Administration released total sales through October 13th on Tuesday. The top 10 dispensaries open in the state have sold just over 1,900 pounds of medical marijuana. Civil rights icon and Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings died Thursday at the age of 68. Washington correspondent Morgan Wright reports on the reaction to Cummings' passing from both sides of the political divide.
Maryland has lost a beloved son.
The death of Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings has struck the hearts of many in Washington. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says he's mourning the loss of his friend of nearly 30 years.
He was a rock. He was a rock of integrity and principle.
On Capitol Hill, the tributes poured in. Republicans and Democrats paid their respects to the late congressman and reflected on the legacy he leaves behind.
Over more than 2 decades in the House of Representatives, Cummings became a living legend.
We've all lost a friend. I'm devastated by the loss.
Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy says Cummings was known to speak truth to power.
There are a handful of people who, just have these core convictions. They know what's right and they know what's wrong, and they don't really care about the political cost.
There's a huge void by Congressman Cummings' loss. No one will fill that void.
Maryland Senator Ben Cardin says lawmakers must preserve Cummings' legacy and continue his pursuit for social justice, fairness, and to make the world a better place.
His last days, he was still working here through telephone with the Oversight Committee to get things done.
As chairman of the House Oversight Committee, he oversaw investigations of President Trump and drew the ire of the president, but he even acknowledged his passing, tweeting that his work and voice on so many fronts will be very hard, if not impossible, to replace. Thursday, the White House and the Capitol lowered their flags to half-staff, and a black bunting covered the congressman's congressional office to mark Cummings' passing. Reporting in Washington, Morgan Wright.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
That's going to do it for this week's show. We're back with an all-new Capitol View next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.